G'day, it's Michael here from Fishing McFishface, and I want to talk to you about snorkeling at Cudgen Creek, which is at Kingscliff in Australia. So there's a lot of things you can see at Cudgen Creek. This is a snapshot here of the entrance, and we've got some bannerfish, lots of different colourful fish, beaked coral fish, stingrays, got a pelican, a few pelicans that are resident there, mangrove jacks, eels, starfish, crabs, all sorts of things. So let's have a look. So, where is Cudgen Creek? I'll play this little video of Google Earth. We're in Australia for Cudgen Creek, right on the east coast and on the border of New South Wales and Queensland. So just in New South Wales, but pretty close to Brisbane. We've got Brisbane up here. So if you want to fly in the airport at Brisbane or Gold Coast Airport, that's Gold Coast down here, Coolangatta. They're the surf breaks. And then down here is Kingscliff. This is the Cudgen Creek system. There's a big reef out the back here where a lot of people do fishing. And then we have the creek itself here. And I'll zoom out just a little bit. And there we go. So we've got two seawalls, and a lot of the fish habitat is actually within the rocks of these seawalls at the entrance of the creek and along this seawall here. And then there's actually a few rocks within the creek as well in the creek bed. So lots of areas to snorkel and look at. But what I want to do now is look at the weather conditions. So you've got an idea of when's the best time to go there, when it might not be a good time. So at Cudgen Creek, the weather, the creek itself is pretty resilient to weather. So we've got things like rain. That's probably the biggest factor for Cudgen Creek. If you've had heavy rain, probably in the last 2 or 3 days, you might get murkier conditions at Cudgen Creek. But because it's a fairly small creek system, it goes back to a lake, but it's not as big as other systems like harbours or things like the Tweed River entrance or Gold Coast Seaway. It actually flushes out, a lot of the dirty water from the rain pretty quickly. So if it's rained a fair bit and then you get maybe 2 or 3 days of sunny, clear weather, then the creek will be pretty clear. And the other thing to consider, so these are just some images here. This is what it can look like on a really good day. You can see that's quite clear, and you might get, I'm not a good judge of visibility, but probably 10 meters of water visibility plus. But then if it's been rainy recently, you can get very murky and it's not very visible. So that's like any snorkeling spot really. But generally it's pretty resilient to rain. Tide is a big factor. So what you want is you want to go to Cudgen Creek ideally when the tide is rising, or especially at the high tide itself. Once the tide starts to turn and goes down again, so the tide's going out to sea, the dirtier water from the lake comes through, and sometimes it's not too dirty, but I think there's a bit of a temperature change too. So you get a thermocline where you get this sort of hazy looking water that's less clear. So really what you want to do is get there on the rising tide, and especially close to high tide, and you'll get very clear conditions most of the time. For swell, it's not too much of a challenge here because a lot of the swell is broken up by this outer reef, and you'll often get southerly and easterly swells at this location. That's just the climate we have on the east coast of Australia. But in summer, sometimes you get northerly swells from cyclones a bit further up north, and in that case you might get a few waves actually really punching through here. So, but if there's waves, you just don't do as much snorkeling near the entrance of the creek. You do more of your snorkeling further south, near the beach area and the park area and the boat ramp. So it's pretty resilient to swell. Wind, it's pretty resilient to wind too. Most of the time we'll get southerly or easterly wind, during summer and then through, well, almost through to winter as well. Mostly southerly in winter and a bit of westerly. But because we've got rock walls on either side, if it's windy on one side, you can just pick the other side. So it's pretty resilient to wind, and temperature's pretty nice all year round. It'll probably go down to as low as maybe 20 degrees Celsius in winter, maybe a little bit cooler. But I find in summer I don't wear a wetsuit, and in winter or autumn or spring. I might just wear a spring suit, but it's quite comfortable water for, I'll be in the water for about an hour or so with the spring suit in winter, and I'll only just start to get cold after an hour. So as far as weather conditions go, Cudgen Creek is really resilient, really good. It's a good, if everything else, all the other locations in the Gold Coast or that area of Brisbane or Sunshine Coast aren't working, then Cudgen Creek is a go-to place to still get some good snorkeling. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is actually go through each of the spots on um, the Cudgen Creek area and show you what sort of fish you might find, because I've done a lot of snorkeling there and you tend to see similar fish in the same sort of spots, and to give you an idea of the wildlife you could encounter. So let's start here, and the entrance where you've got parking here, which is fantastic, great accessibility, and you'll park here. This is a fish gutting station here, which is actually a really cool feature for snorkeling because you get a lot of fish here. And you'll just walk down. There's actually a ramp that goes right down into the water. Very great, it's great accessibility for snorkelers and swimmers. You get a lot of swimmers who pass by here. Not so many fishermen. Most of the fishermen actually go out onto the reef. Yeah, so you'll walk in here, and nice shallow sort of, probably goes down to 2 meters at high tide, 1 meter, and then maybe 3 or 4 meters down here. So it's all fairly shallow and safe place to swim. So this area here in particular, let's look at the fish that you'll find there. That's where you get the fish gutting station. So people will fillet their fish, or get all the guts out, and they'll throw the fish guts and carcass down these pipes, which dump them into the water here. And you'd think it might be all smelly and dirty, but the fish do a pretty good job of cleaning it all up. So you'll see lots of stripy fish, you'll see lots of sergeant majors and brim, toadfish, and yeah, lots of luderick. All these sorts of fish are literally swarming everywhere, big flathead. And you can see here, this is actually a snapshot from when there's a bit of red in here. That's actually a fish carcass from a bigger fish someone caught, and they've put it through the chute, and there's just fish frenzy going on here, picking the fish apart. So it's actually pretty cool to see the big frenzy happening when you're snorkeling. And I've never seen a shark in this area. There are some sharks, from what I've heard, out in the reef area, but I've never seen one in the water with me in the creek area, so I think it's fairly safe. You'll also get a few pelicans that will hang around this area too, and even one of the locals I had a chat to, she was saying she's actually got a name for this pelican. I think it's Herbie or something. So it's a very nice, friendly local community, and people know the same pelicans and some of the fish that are always in the same spots, and yeah, it's a really nice atmosphere. Okay, so moving on to the next spot, we've got the southwest part of the seawall. This is the southwest seawall, but there's actually some rocks, natural rocks through this area here, and sometimes the sand covers it up more or less, but you generally see those rocks, and there's some excellent fish there. So when you go down, sometimes you'll find mangrove jack at the rocks, certainly lots of brim and luderick, some smaller blue-barred parrotfish and surgeonfish. You get the odd moon wrasse, you get the male and female ones, and there's a different type of wrasse. I can't remember what it's called, but if you look up in the videos in the description, I've put the names of all these fish in the chapters of the dives that I've done here. You got sea mullets. Every now and then, it's pretty disgusting, but you'll see a big swarm of striped catfish, and it's interesting to see, but it's kind of disgusting as well. So, but sometimes you'll see them. Sergeant majors along the edges. So this goes for all the rocky areas. On the sort of the borders of the sand and the rocky or pebbly areas, you'll often find boxfish or pufferfish. So there's one here you can see. And I've occasionally seen brown sweetlips, or I think they call them sweetlip brim, or there's a few names for them, but some bigger fish in that area. orange blotch juvenile, orange blotch surgeonfish, and convict surgeonfish. Lots of different types of surgeonfish down there, munching away on the little bits of algae and seaweed on the rocks. You get different types of butterfly fish. This is a beaked coral fish. So you still get the tropical coloured looking fish in that area. And you'll get some flathead in the sandy areas too. So lots of different types of fish. Again, we've got a wrasse here. I think it's an orange or red spot wrasse. It's got these great blue stripes, iridescent blue stripes on it. So all those sorts of fish you'll find in this rocky area. So really cool spot. The next area I'll often look at. So if you're a beginner, start near the fish gutting station and just along this wall. And you might even just spend a whole day just looking at this area here without going into the other spots. And it's quite a safe spot through here too. So this section in yellow, you'll see a lot of the same sort of fish, but you get a few different types. This is a type of bannerfish. It's quite pretty. More sergeant majors and bait fish all over the place. This is a sulphur damselfish. So you'll see these bright yellow fish sometimes. Some more wrasse. I think that's a Gunther's wrasse. I've seen some strange looking jellyfish there too, which I don't see often. There's not often many jellyfish, but this one has these rainbow colours that flash through on its tiny little hair fins, so that's quite interesting. You'll see some damselfish with blue and orange and purple and orange and all sorts of colours. You've got a threadfin butterfly fish. You'll see a few little burrows around the place, and if you're lucky, sometimes you'll actually see a little goby fish actually in the burrow. So that's quite cool. And yeah, another one of these damselfish. So there's lots of colourful fish along these rocks too. Just got to be patient as you're snorkeling along. Take your time, sit in the same spot, look in the same area for a little while, stay still, and then all of a sudden you'll start to see all the movement and life around you. So yeah, quite an interesting spot. You get flathead along the border of the intersection of the sand and the rocks. And I've seen a few flounder there too, which are pretty cool to film. Goatfish, crested morwong, these black and white stripes. They've got like a big cockatoo crest on them when you go near them. And here we go, there's another shot of the crested morwong and a wrasse. Yeah, and some more damselfish. So this is the other fish that I really like in this spot. This is called a white-barred goby, and often you'll see them a bit paler, but in this particular creek area you get some big ones which have got these real dark colours, and they're sort of purple with a white tail, yellow fins, and they've got this iridescent blue and red pattern all through their face that only really appears when you get a sunlight on them, and they're quite spectacular. So you'll see a couple of these in pairs at particular rock spots, and they'll just sit in the same spot the whole time. You'll see them in the same spot every time you go, so keep an eye out for them. I think they're really cool. A few more butterfly fish, and occasionally, I haven't seen this one many times, but I've seen a zebra. It's like a type of lionfish, zebrafish, I think, which you certainly would not want to touch because the spines are very, very painful, I've heard, if you get whacked by one of them. But yeah, just don't touch it with your hands. It'll stay where it is. But they're quite pretty. You also get some, these are called 3-bar porcupine fish. It's like a big puffer fish, and they're really great to film because they often will look at you for a while and they don't move too quickly. So you can sit there and film them for a while. I think that's a lot of fun when you find these to film them. And a few others. So you can see there's a lot of different fish you'll find in this one area. On the rocks, so I've got some gloves, protective gloves, so I can actually lightly hold onto the rocks if there's a bit of surge or the oysters without cutting myself. And what that means is you can get a bit closer and you can look at little fish like mud skippers that actually sit on the rocks. And they've got some interesting colours on them, and yeah, just a different type of fish to look at. So yeah, lots of different fish. We've got sea mullets that will come in little packs, and they'll come and munch on the algae and sand and spit the sand out as they go along the brim. So plenty in that area there. That's a great spot to start with. You don't need to look at the other spots. if you just want to stay there the whole time. But as you go to this spot more, there's different sorts of fish you see at different locations. So this area here, the northwest seawall, it can actually, it's probably the spot that gets most affected by waves, because you get waves from the east coming in through here, or the south wrapping around. So you do have to be careful of the waves and the surge that can push you, kind of wash you into the rocks as you're snorkeling there. But you do get some interesting fish, so it's worthwhile checking it out. This little beach here is very popular. You get a lot of people, a lot of families come here with their kids because it's a very safe spot here. But you do get a few more waves as you go further north. So what are you going to see here? I haven't actually really gone around the corner before because there's often a lot of waves. But up to about here, you've got, you can go snorkeling there if the waves aren't too big. What you'll see here, sometimes I tend to see a few more convict surgeon fish in this area. Not as many fish as further in, but I see a few more damselfish. So you can see this bright blue damselfish that you'll see. Butterfly fish, stripies, more butterfly fish. Again, the stripies. That's one of the damselfish that you'll see quite a lot of these damselfish if you look carefully. Blue and yellow with a big blue dot on the back, and they're all over the place, but I've often seen a few in this area. Mullet, and that's about it. It's not as good up here, but there's still plenty to see on the northwest seawall. Okay, moving across to the southeast seawall, down here where it says Cudgen Creek Beach, there's actually sort of a rocky outcrop here, which is an extension of the rock wall, and then it comes around here. You got some shallower sand, and then there's sort of like a little tree stump or a tree trunk that's down over here with some deeper water. You get a few fish in there too. So in this area, these are the sorts of fish that I've often found. At this rocky area, you get convict surgeonfish and damsels, similar to the north west seawall that I showed before. Stars and stripes, pufferfish. I've seen quite a few different types of pufferfish in this area. Neon damsels, I really like the neon damsels, bright blue with a yellow tail. Or often we'll see them in this area here. I've seen a starfish here before, only once, so it's not common from what I've seen, but you might see some starfish. Again, more of these different types of pufferfish, or sometimes they call them cowfish. But yeah, essentially, if you look along dive down and look at the intersection of the sand and the rocks, you'll often find a few of these types of fish. Pufferfish, tobies, leather jackets, they all like that sort of area. We've got more damsels. You'll see groups of these damsels, brightly coloured damsels in these areas, so that's quite nice. This particular fish I generally only see on the southeast seawall rather than the northwest seawall, and I think it's a pearly wrasse or a Gunther's wrasse, but you get this bright green, like a fluorescent bright green and red coloration, and they're quite interesting. So they'll swim past fairly quick, the wrasse fish, but if you're in the right spot at the right time with your camera, they'll come right up past you and fairly close. So these are the sorts of fish that I often like to see when I'm over that side. Sometimes you'll see stingrays. I've seen them on this side and further south as well. Often, I think, masked, blue-spotted mask rays, they call them. In the sandy area, in this area here, I've seen a few fish that where you'll only see their eyes out of the sand. So they bury themselves in. So this is a type of lizardfish. And I first saw it with just its eyes poking up in the sand. And then I thought, oh, what's that? Look a bit closer. And it pops out of the sand and swims a bit further. So keep an eye out for those when you're swimming along. You'll see these porcupine fish in just about all the spots in Cudgen Creek. So I've seen them over here too. And then a lot of the similar fish you'll see in the northeast seawall area too. So all the way up to here, moving further out towards the entrance. At the top here, you'll actually get some schools of fish. I often see big schools of diamond fish, or these little, the sand doesn't show it here, but there's a few little rocky outcrops in the middle, and you'll get a little school of fish. And so crested morlongs, surgeonfish, brim, and you get schools of mullet passing by. I see bigger schools of mullet on this side of the seawall over here compared to the other side, so that's a spot if you want to see them. They're quite funny because you see them sort of munching away on their sand and looking at you at the same time, and then they spit this after they get what they want to eat. They sort of spit the sand out. You get these little puffs of sand following them. This is a different type of sergeant fish that I've seen not very often, but sometimes you'll see that those bigger sergeant fish in the rocks. I had some really good footage here of this zebra lionfish on this side, so it must swim across from time to time, but keep an eye out for that. And yeah, a few more types of wrasse, mud skippers or blennies. I'm not exactly sure of the exact species. These ones you'll see at both sides, the two-lined monocle brim, I think they're called, and that's the juvenile version. And when they grow a bit older, they actually have more of a upward stripe rather than the horizontal. Then we have these saddle, what are they called? Saddled filefish, I think. Black saddled filefish. They're a type of sort of in that puffer fish, boxfish, cowfish sort of family. And then we've got, this is called a dusky wrasse, I think, and they're spectacular. They're very skittish, so when you're trying to film them, they'll often really swim away quickly. But they've got these spectacular orange and green lines and like an aqua blue tail, so keep an eye out for them. And yeah, more of these red spot, I think they're called red spot wrasse, with these beautiful blue streaks in them as well. So yeah, you get a lot of wrasse on this side that I've noticed. And yeah, the occasional juvenile damselfish or as well. Okay, so moving on to if you're a bit more advanced in your snorkeling and you enjoy doing deeper dives and holding your breath for longer and you want to see bigger fish, I'd suggest looking at the Southern Rocks area. So this area here is, you can see on the maps, we've got rocks here, it's a deeper sort of channel, rocks all along the edge here, underneath the pontoons, and a few rocks here. So this whole section here, you'll get some of the bigger fish, which is very interesting. So we'll start here because there's a lot of variety of fish that you'll find. So this orange spot here, there's sort of these grazed rocks that are shallower, and then these deeper rocks here. So on the grazed rocks, you'll see a lot of flathead and some really big flathead. I've seen flathead that are like, this one was pretty big, but I think this is the biggest one I've seen. And this was probably, I mean, 60, 70, 80 centimeters. It's hard to tell when you're underwater, but big, thick flathead. And you can often get very close to them just before they start to move. I'm pretty sure that's a barracuda, and I saw that in the deeper water here. So yeah, interesting to see them coming through. These are a yellow tail barracuda, I think. So they're a bit smaller, but you often see them in schools and in the deeper sandy areas. I've seen them a few times. You get the whiting, more surgeonfish, and blue-barred parrotfish. I've seen quite a few in this area. Blue-spotted mask rays. And again, more in this area. You get big schools of fish like diamond fish, mullet on the surface. And I've actually seen a big mud crab down there too. So have a look. When you're diving down here and you get down to these bigger rocks, dive down and have a look. Don't put your head in, of course, but just have a look down deep and look through the little sort of caverns and ledges of the rocks, and you'll often find very interesting fish and creatures in those little caverns. Some rabbit fish, I think, and stripies, silver biddies. Yeah, lots of different fish in this area. Neon damsels. So most of the fish that you'll see on the rock walls are in this area, but you've just got to go a bit deeper to see them. Yeah, we've got the puffer style fish, cowfish. This leather jacket, there's a few different types of leather jacket you'll see here. I think that's a yellowfin leather jacket. This is I can't remember the name of it, but look at the video I've got in the link. I've got the name of it there. But this is like a small leather jacket, which has got a blue fade to green, fade to orange tail. It's quite spectacular. Very small though. And a moray eel. This eel I've actually seen on multiple dives, but unfortunately I don't think it's there anymore because it looked very sick and old when I filmed it. It didn't move, and then the next week I went back, it was in the same spot, and it might have been breathing or it might have just been water going through its gills. But since then I've actually seen its skeleton down there, so I don't think this poor moray eel's still there anymore, but they do live there, so you might find another one day. Yeah, moonwrasse, all sorts of fish there. So if we move down to the lower section, the southern area of the Southern Rocks, uh, you get more of the bigger fish. So probably includes a bit of this area too. Lots of these 3-bar porcupine fish. Most of these big rocks will have one of these 3-bar porcupine fish sitting underneath, usually the southern side of the ledge of the rock. So when you go snorkeling, when you go dive down and just take your time to have a look under the ledges. And of course, don't get stuck or put your head under, but from a distance, look under the ledges, and you'll almost always see a few 3-bar porcupine fish just chilling out under the ledge. And when you get closer, they'll swim away, but they're pretty cool to see. I saw a really good sized fan belly leather jacket. They're quite spectacular. They'll put their trigger up and their big fan belly. They'll poke it out when you get close. So some fish you've got to be really careful and slow when you get to them, otherwise they'll spook. But these leather jackets, often you can actually swim quick towards them, and they'll actually stand their ground and show all their color, their patterns and everything. So if you want to get good footage, sometimes you actually want to get close to them and almost pretend to scare them, and they'll actually show you everything. So that's pretty cool. There's a few rocks here where there's like this little kind of what would you call it? Like a natural bridge rock across, so you can dive under and just have a look under this little ledge. It's like a little mini cave, and often I'll see seems to be like a resident um, mangrove jack that sits there, and a bunch of Moses snapper as well. So cool spot in there. And there's also a big type of rock cod. I'm not quite sure exactly what type it is, but this one's pretty big. It's probably 40, 50 centimeters and quite thick, heavy fish. And I chatted to a local snorkeler, and he pointed this out to me. He said, "Oh, have you seen the rock cod?" So he actually swam down, and he said he snorkels there a lot. And there's about 4 different little mini caves under some rocks. Not ones that you swim into, but you can poke your camera in. And he says if you check all 4 of them, you'll almost always find this cod in one of them. So yeah, really cool to go have a look for it. And if you just check all the spots, eventually you'll probably see this local cod. It's quite spectacular. You'll often get these schools of striped catfish on the edges of these rocks when you dive down deeper. You've got more of these sort of box fish or cowfish. These are the black saddle filefish, I think. And you get the white-barred gobies there too. Really, you'll get a lot of the species you get along the main rock walls in this area, but you just got to go a little bit deeper to see them. So for Cudgen Creek, I'm going to give it an overall rating. I'm going to do this for all the different locations that I give you an overview of. Is it beginner friendly? I think 4 out of 5 rating. It's very beginner friendly. The only reason why I wouldn't give it 5 is because the tidal current is reasonably strong if you go as the tide is changing. But it's so nice. You'll almost any time of the day, really, when the sun's out, there'll be at least 10, 15 people just chilling out in the water, having a swim on a sand island in the middle. On the other side, people swimming, doing laps in the morning all the way through the creek. You don't even think about, um, you know, oh, what's that shadow near me, or those sharks or anything, because there's just so many people around. It's a really pleasant, friendly place. So I really recommend, if you're a beginner, go here to start with. It's fantastic. In terms of weather resilience, 4 out of 5. It's as far as the river entrances go, which all suffer from being rain affected, because you do have sediment that runs off into the rivers and has to be flushed out through a few tide cycles. But because it's such a small creek, it flushes that sediment out pretty quickly. So give it a day or two after heavy rain, and it'll be back to clear again when it comes to high tide. So really resilient to weather, and it's resilient to waves, wind, all those factors. So yeah, great spot to go for weather resilience if all the other spots are a bit murky. In terms of water visibility, 4 out of 5. You want to pick your tide right, because it can get a little bit murky or a bit like a thermocline effect. The water can get a bit wavy on when you get moving down towards the low tide. But if you pick the right tide, and it hasn't rained heavily recently, it'll almost always be crystal clear. 10 meters almost of water visibility. Really nice. In terms of wildlife variety, I've given it 3, and it really is fantastic. You get a lot of wildlife, but I just have to leave 4 and 5 stars for places like the Great Barrier Reef, and locally to me, Tangalooma, shipwrecks, like that's got maybe 4-star wildlife variety. But as far as a river entrance goes, and a local spot that's easily accessible, fantastic wildlife variety, as you saw from all the photos of fish that I showed you. Accessibility, I haven't seen anything better in terms of accessibility. You park just on the right here, all along this road. You're literally 20 meters from the entrance to the water. A nice ramp with rails. I've even seen, I think it's one of the locals, he brings his friend along who's disabled, and brings him in his wheelchair down the boat ramp, and he'll float around in the water out of his wheelchair with a flotation device in the same swimming area, and he'll put his snorkel on and sometimes watch the fish. So it's, as far as accessibility, and even if you've got a disability, it's fantastic. Really good place. So yeah, highly rate Cudgen Creek to go snorkeling. Now, the other thing that I've rated it on is safety, which is important for snorkeling, because some places aren't that safe. I'd give it 4 out of 5 for safety. The only reason it's not 5 is because you do get boats that come through here every now and then. They go very slowly. So mate, just have a snorkel with a bright colour on it, and you'll hear the boats when they're coming. You'll hear the ticking underwater of the motor. But they go very, very slowly, and they know that a lot of people swim here. And the other thing is, when the current is a bit strong, it can be a little bit dangerous if you're not a comfortable swimmer. But if you're snorkeling, I assume you can swim already. So yeah, in terms of water depth, it never gets deeper than about 4 meters, 4 or 5 meters. So it's a really, really safe place. All right, well, that's all. I hope you enjoyed this overview of snorkeling at Cudgen Creek. I hope you get down there, enjoy the water, and see plenty of wildlife. Put comments down below. Tell me what you see at Cudgen Creek, what other creatures you've found there. And yeah, I'd love to hear your feedback, and tell me if there's any other locations you want to do. I've got a few that I've already got in store that I'm going to do an overview of different locations, but let me know if there's any others you'd like me to do a review of. All right, thanks for listening. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the water.